morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today. And thanks, Bennett. He made it much easier for me to explain what we're going to talk about. Essentially, what I'm going to speak to you about is the essentials of cash flows, or more accurately, the essentials of how cash flies. Luckily, I have some common grounds with also George, talking about the timing of getting your financing, and then we take it to the next level. Starting from here, it's just only the key takeaways. We're not going to start with there. The idea is that this is the part where we talk about now the traditional cash flow statement is divided into three sections. One, which is the most important part, is the operation cash flows, or net cash flows from operations. And then that is your own business. Now, it's fine if you have negative cash flows for a while, but for business viability, it's not healthy at all to have negative operating cash flows. And what we mean by operating cash flows, I will walk you through immediately. Then you have the financing cash flows, which is how you can cover the gap, as Bennett pointed to. The idea is, we know that cash flows are cash inflows and cash outflows. But when it comes to SMEs, it is actually the lifeblood of the economy. Why? From the Ministry of Economy, statistics show that you have like more than 350,000 SMEs in town, and they represent approximately 86% of the private sector's workforce and almost 60% of the GDP. And that is growing and should grow further. That's why cash flow is not an accounting number or as a cash balance that is normal for SMEs. It's the lifeblood, in my opinion. What do we mean by cash conversion cycle, and why I want to tailor an emphasis on that in specific is because we have it all on the back of our mind. All entrepreneurs and business managers do have it in the back of their mind. It's a simple cycle. The cycle is that we know, now not all businesses have inventory, but the idea is we know that you buy your goods or you establish your services, then you pay your suppliers, you store if you have an inventory, then you sell and collect your cash. In other words, it's acquisition of inventory for companies in the manufacturing, for example, and then you store it, sell it, then you collect the cash. And by the way, if you look at the major successful stories in the SMEs, and some of them graduated to the bigger corporates, is when it comes to optimizing the cash collection, the cash process or cash system. If we looked at troubled companies before, they either stacked a lot of inventory, like if we've seen the American Apparel and the story behind the inventory, it could kill the business. Or the inability to collect your cash, which if you overcome it, you become even bigger and bigger. And we've seen Souq.com, for example, and other names also like Kareem and other businesses. And the secret is behind digitizing your payment systems. You sell your products, and even richer. You pay your products immediately by a credit card, you collect your cash. But the most troubled companies within the SME, it's actually because it's inherited from bigger companies. Bigger companies don't pay quickly to smaller businesses. I will walk you through a quick example. It's metaphoric, chasing a $100 company with a simple balance sheet. We just started the business, you have $100, and that's your capital. Under normal scenario, assuming that you have an average collection period, or you collect your cash every 180 days, the storage or the stock you have remains for 180 days, and you pay your suppliers within 180 days. And if you sold the $100 business for 110, that means the $10 profit, right? Or a profit margin of 10%. Reverse engineering the numbers on your balance sheet will come out with the following items, which is very simple. Cash will be 55 receivables, 50 inventory, and on the other hand, accounts payable 50, and your total balance sheet 160, which is your $110 of profit, and 50 is a short-term financing from your accounts payable. What does that mean? It means you have a cash and inventory to invest in the next cycle. And that I will come to the point where George raised when it comes to failing, and 90% of the business fail at some point in the reinvestment process, is you have $105, which means next year, assuming you have the same profit margin, you will have $11 or 10%, or 11%, now from 10% to 11% return on initial investment. Now what happens, and what happened before? We've seen, from a banking point of view, we've seen how the SMEs fell into the trap of liquidity. And I think I'm touching on the pain here. Why? Because the acceleration and deceleration of your cash conversion cycle can be deadly. How can we say that? Now, of course, before going there, the powerful digital platforms can make it faster. Business-to-business bartering, I believe in digitizing operations, but I don't believe in digitizing your relationships. And unfortunately, during the last 15 years, shifting the personal touch in terms of relationships in person and not through social media is affecting the cash conversion cycle within the SME sector. Crowdfunding, factoring and invoice financing, credit scoring are all available, but there is a knowledge gap as far as we observe between the usage of these products and also the ability to spread awareness from major providers, especially banks and financial institutions. They only lend you when your cash conversion cycle is intact and when you don't need it. Now, the second, an accelerated cash conversion cycle, if you employed technology, if you were able, theoretically speaking, to speed up your cash collection period, to make your inventory move faster, and to keep your accounts payable intact, which is the days in accounts payable, you pay within the same terms. As simple as that. Your balance sheet will never change in terms of size, but the allocation of cash, you have $108 cash, assuming 50% drop in the collection period and in the days in inventory. And what does that mean? That means that you will have, for the next accounting period, or next fiscal period, around $133 cash available for reinvestment. Simply said, that's next year profit of $13. Now you were able, by enhancing your cash conversion cycle, enhancing your profitability from 11% to 13%, or actually 10% initially to 13%. And that's a big jump, and it's metaphorically speaking, but for companies, if you go for companies that now have powerful digital platforms and applications to pay, and with the same businesses without the same digital platforms, you will find out that the cycle affects between 5 to 7% of their next period expected return. Now, the other side of the story is when you have their cash conversion cycle decelerated, which is what we've seen during the last couple of years because of the general economic situation, inflationary pressure, collection inefficiencies, stiff competition, and also one more important aspect that I think we're not yet ready is the value-added tax, which, in our opinion, it's a small percentage, but it will affect your cash conversion cycle, and that's why you have to be prepared beforehand. Taking the same example with an average collection period pumped up to 270 days, inventory days, 270 days, while the supplies, the average payment period remained the same. Look at how detrimental this slower cycle will be on the balance sheet. The balance sheet will not show anything. You still have done $160 and you still have made profits of $10. Just seconding what Bennett told you, is that revenues and profits for the period, which is looking backwards, remains the same. In each scenario, you did $10, but now the challenge is in the coming period. You will only have $78 available to reinvest next year, or during the next period. And that means your return on investment will simply drop from $10 or $11 or $13 to $8. And that takes me to the next point, which is the challenges happen, is that you have less liquidity and you have less capability to have further liquidity in the next period. When you have enough profitability, it's ironic, but it's the reality of business. Banks chase after businesses that are successful, while they don't really need the cash at this point. But the idea is, for businesses to avoid a fatal mistake, is to have the cash when you really have the capability to have it, not when you really need it. So it needs pure planning. So you have only $8. And this is the last slide, which is just only to compare and what usually happens. Last year and the year before, in the UAE, we had a decelerated cycle. And businesses did make either losses or small profits in a way that businesses had hiccups. You needed some cash, even if you did profits. But banks with higher effective cost of borrowing, giving the SMEs hard times to find the funding. And that's when you actually need it. And businesses try to go for equity at that point, while the business is not really attractive, but it could probably be the right time. However, when you have a normal cycle and accelerated cycle, banks are happy, so they will be borrow you, but also equity investors will be approaching you. When it is the right time to go for financing, you might be approached by equity investors, you might be taken over, you could be enticed by the valuations offered, while the right time is to have debt when you're in a good condition, because the right mix of capital structure might actually maximize your return equity. We should always be monitoring the spread between what you make in terms of money and the effective cost of borrowing. So that's it. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. And the presentation ends here. Please feel free to reach out to me for any further details. And I'm more than happy and open to receive any questions. Thank you very much.